Stories that matter. The journey of life from birth to death is an extraordinary trip, sometimes filled with great joy and excitement, but at other times filled with pain, sorrow, and disappointment. Stories That Matter shares both extremes with you. Sometimes our stories will make you feel very happy, but the journey of life is not all happiness. Other times, the journey of life will make you feel sad, for all of us have experienced both extremes. Stories That Matter will begin right after the break with a story that will touch your heart in the journey of life.
Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Brandon Swarts. Brandon, thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
I wanted to take some of the experiences in your life and share with other people, because there are people of different ages that watch this show. Some will be much younger. They haven't been through the things that you have been through. Others are going through it right now. Others are beyond that in their age, and they say, yep, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me. So you've got an interesting story. Where do you want to start?
Well, I was born in Abilene, Kansas. Lived there my whole life, except for 8th and 9th grade. Moved to Hoisington, Kansas, Fremont, Nebraska. Came back to Abilene, graduated there. Started off as a kid, joined kids wrestling at 5 years old. Wrestled mostly through high school until drinking came along. Had a normal childhood, I would say, riding bikes around Abilene, going to the swimming pool, and doing the things kids do. And then about 13, started drinking.
That's pretty young.
Yeah, it was me and a friend of mine stole a 12-pack of beer from his grandpa, and that's how it got started. And it wasn't continual right there, but that opened the door to 8th grade. Started drinking, chewing, doing that. And did your parents know that you were? Did they notice anything about you, that you were getting into alcohol, or they smell your breath? Anything? Well, the first time, the 12-pack of beer deal, I was pretty hungover. Mom, I was throwing up, and Mom knew. So we got in trouble, and it kind of just lay dormant there for a year or so. But on and off, getting the older guys to buy us beer, and that started. Really no drugs in high school. Just a lot of drinking. Got into the whiskey, and a lot of fights, and just a lot of partying in high school.
Were you one of those person that got drunk, got 10 foot tall and strong? And
I was.
Oh, yeah?
I was that person. It's embarrassing, but yes, it is. And I see a lot of people now that and I always try to make amends with them and apologize, and it's gone pretty good. Everyone I've met has either forgiven me or they've moved on past it. But yeah, I was a hellraiser, I guess you could say, in high school.
And then somewhere in there, did it change somewhere in
there
it
did.
After high school? Or
yeah, I did, drastically.
What'd you do after high school? I'm not talking about the drugs and stuff, but I mean, what'd you do for a living?
I started working. I had a job out at Abilene Machine, Great Plains. I had worked for a general machining, and I learned how to run CNC lathes and mills right outside Abilene here, and I did that during high school too, so I kind of just followed that career right out of high school. But I had my daughter. She was born when I was a senior in high school.
Your daughter was born?
Yeah, she was.
When you were a senior?
I was a senior, yeah. She was born in
And the mom,
91.
was she a high school student?
No, she was a little older than I was. No, she was older than I was. So we had her, and out of high school, right out of high school, I mean, that's where the story begins, I got introduced to methamphetamine, and with my drinking, it instantly stopped. And I realized I couldn't do that and spend the money on it and take away from our family bills. So some older guys told me, you need to start selling it, and they kind of showed me how and got me going down that road. And
okay, well, let me ask you this one here. When you talk about the meth, what were you looking for?
I came from a divorced family, and I think just being that boy that's kind of broken and always wanted to be somebody. I had a future in wrestling, and I quit. Had a good wrestling coach in high school. I don't know if I can say his name, Mr. Krishner. He really fought for me not to quit. He went above and beyond as a teacher and a wrestling coach to invest to try to get me to stay in wrestling. But I decided I wanted a car, and I wanted to work, and I wanted to drink beer, and it just I quit and quit football and really just started running around acting wild. And then when the meth came involved, I met some people from out of town, and all these things fell into my lap. And I would work, but then I started selling drugs on the side, and I guess I felt there was some power. It's crazy to think, that doing something so bad, but when you're so broken inside, it made me feel, I guess, I was searching to be somebody, and I really put my efforts into that, and more efforts into anything in life, I tried to start selling drugs. It went into the marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine. I was, for 2 years, just just out there, just really going wild. And then we got arrested. There was like 30 of us that got arrested. And in '94, I went to prison for the first time.
I want to talk to you about when you went to prison. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Brandon Swarts. And Brandon, we were talking about you finished high school, now you were out in the world and had a job. And instead of going from the alcohol that you started when you was like 13, now you moved into meth and marijuana, and from that you realized, this is an expensive habit.
Yeah.
And I can't cut into my income to be able to do this and still provide for the little one. Were you now with the mom of the?
Yes, we
so
were.
the three of you were together, and so then you
she
said,
did not approve of it.
No, okay.
No, she this was all behind her back.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. And then you got into selling because it made money for you.
Yeah.
And then go ahead. What happened from there?
We got in a rather large case here in Dixon County and Saline County, and there were 30 of us. And as it all played out, I went to prison for 2.5 years. And out of the 8 charges I was charged with for sales and distribution, I pled guilty to possession of cocaine. And I went for 2.5 years in prison. And
where were you at?
I went to started out in Norton, then El Dorado, and my custody came down, and I ended up going to work release in Wichita when it was all said and done. But prior to leading up to that, in the county jail in Abilene, a lot of people know of Clarence Garton.
Sure.
He was having Bible studies, and I'll never forget them asking me, Swarts, do you want to go to a Bible study? And I said no. I'm young, and
like,
I'm
why
in
would
trouble,
I want to go?
And I heard Clarence. That was the old jail back there where there were just bars. And I heard him down there speaking the word. So I told the jailer, hey, let me go down there. And he said, man, you done told me no. And so we went ahead. He opened the door and let me down there. And I remember just getting on my knees and crying.
Why were you crying?
The whole time I was doing all that, it just never felt right deep inside. As human beings, I thank God, He created us. We were born in that sin nature. But there's just something in all of us that's yearning for something good, But then there's the other side of us that the world starts taking and builds strength, and once we get going down that road, it gets bigger and bigger. So I got out and
well, let me go back to this a little bit with Clarence Garton.
Yes.
Now, for the people that don't know, Clarence was a farmer, lived outside of Abilene.
Yes, he was.
And his ministry was that he would go to the jail and try to reach to people while they were in the jail. And many times you're down here at the bottom, and so you're receptive.
Yes.
And Clarence had such tremendous success. He was very patient, a very wonderful man.
Yeah.
So you were blessed with that.
Yes,
now,
I was.
Let me ask you this about when you're sitting in jail and you hear Clarence's voice down there and talking, and you say, I've got a hunger within me. I've got a hunger within my heart, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And so as you begin to make contact with Clarence, did you feel that beginning to grow inside of you?
I did. And you know what, now later what I realized is I can still remember Clarence. He was reading out of a psalm, and it was the Word of God. We elevate man. Clarence was a man of God, but I realized, like Paul said, don't receive this as me from a man. It's the Word of God. So it was God's Word that was penetrating through Clarence. Clarence was a vessel, and and I'm glad he was there. And that's where it started. So when I went to prison in the state, I got baptized, and I'd read my Bible at night, but I was 21, 22, and that's not an excuse. Timothy was a very young man in the Bible and did a lot of work, but I don't know how to explain the born again process, if it started there, if it really happened, but when I got it, so the whole time in prison, I'd read my Bible, lift weights, and just when I got out in 96, a few months went by, and I was back to my old ways.
Using and selling?
Yeah. I started out with the selling, and then, of course, using came with it, and I was living in Wichita at the time, Park City. Now, we went 6 years, and I had 3 boys.
You and the girlfriend from high school?
No, we split up when I went to prison. She was done with all that. So I had a high school girlfriend that we were together, and we had 3 boys. And she's a wonderful mother, never involved with the drugs or anything, just loved me and tolerated me, and I would work, but I was always running around, gone, selling drugs, and just trying to keep that out of her and the kids' life. So we had my first son. We lived in Wichita, and I ended up getting in trouble there. They executed a no-knock search warrant on our house, and we weren't there at the time. I mean, they took the doors off the hinges, the whole 9 yards. It was a pretty bad deal. So we moved back to Abilene to come back to
Did
around
that result
family.
in your arrest?
No, they didn't really find nothing in my house, and because they just didn't find nothing there. So it was kind of up in the air. So I'd really just gotten to the point in my addiction that it was bad, and we'd made a decision, instead of splitting up, we were going to go to church. So we went to a little church in Solomon for a few times, and then Pastor Ron Bowles had started Crossroads in Salina, and
good pastor, good church.
Yes, and somehow from my mother, I remember my mother talking about Pastor Ron growing up, because he was at Zion, and she used to go out there some. So I just called one night. I think it was pretty late in the night, if I remember, and his wife answered, and he was out of town, and she said, well, I'll tell you what, just show up on Sunday. And I did. And there was a miracle with my arm, how the Lord had saved my arm. I was going to get it cut off. I was an intravenous drug user. I did every kind of drug there was, and the Lord miraculously healed my arm. I mean,
wow.
They were going to cut it off in the morning, and he healed it. And it was this big, and so Pastor Ron had asked me to give that testimony in front of his church. It felt daunting, to admit in front of a whole church that I was, using needles and all that. Just, it was never right. So for 2 years, we went to Crossroads, and I don't know what happened. I just, got a new job selling cars, was making a lot of money, and kind of quit praying,
Fell away from the Lord?
A little bit, yeah.
And you were on a path that you were going to get to know the Lord more, because you'd said, hey, what's this path over here? And you sort of got on it. I like this, but I know this path over here, the one that goes to hell.
Yeah.
I know that one pretty well. And then you started moving forward a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, when we come back from break, we're going to pick it up from there. Welcome back to Stories That Matter, and I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest, Brandon Swarts. We were talking about your time that you spent with Pastor Ron, and of course Pastor Ron's done one of the shows here, and he told his story about his early days and how he was a mess, and then how the Lord got a hold of him. Is that what happened with you over a period of time?
Yes, over a period of time. I fell away. I walked away from the church again, and did another 2 years in a state prison. Same.
But you weren't doing the drugs while you were attending the church?
Oh, no. When I fell, I just walked completely away.
What made you fall?
I don't know.
I could spell his name for you if you want. Starts with an S.
Yes.
Satan.
Yes, it was. And it was sin. It was that old man in me that, to be honest, knowing what I know now, Romans 6 is my life. I hadn't laid down that old man completely. The truth hadn't hit me I hadn't, it just hadn't hit me. I hadn't laid down that old man. And so I went back into selling drugs. By now I've got three boys. Walked away from my family. Just really went out there. The addiction was starting to take over more and more in my life. I was hopeless. I was helpless. It was the worst time ever in my life to walk away from my children and my family and just run around. And then I got in trouble again and went back to the state prison for 3 years. By now I've lost my family, you know, and I got out in 2006 and there wasn't no hope. I got back into drugs again and I went for 3 years. And then one day the FBI and the DEA arrested me and got indicted in 2009. I got a 15-year prison sentence. So I went to the federal prison and I laid it all down there. Jesus used that to really get a hold of me. He's the one I look back. He allowed me to go there. There's nothing good about prison. There's nothing, you know, I hear young kids, they talk about it like it's some kind of a...
college dorm.
Well, they talk about it like it's some kind of something to be proud of,
Yeah.
and it's not. There's nothing good about it.
No, there's not.
But once you find yourself in that position, you got to do what you can do. And when you're desperate, you'll get delivered. And that's with anybody out there watching.
Yeah.
If you're desperate enough, no matter how hopeless you are, you can get delivered. And I laid it down in there, and I told the Lord, "You do with me what you want. I'll lay it all down." And I stayed in Florence, Colorado for 7 years, and the Lord did mighty things. He, I got a chance to, I turned it into a blessing. I got a chance to really read and study His Word for 12 years, nonstop. I never missed a beat, never got high, never used. The Lord sustained me.
13 years
12
total?
years
12 years
straight on a 15-year sentence. Yes.
But I mean, you served a total of 13
17
years.
altogether.
17 years
in
altogether.
prison altogether.
Okay. Now, you know what I know about this, because I was a mess at different times in my life and before I knew the Lord.
Yeah.
And I would take His hand. I said, "Lord, let me take your hand." And I would. I could almost feel it.
Yes.
And then somewhere, no, I don't want to. I don't want to take your hand. He never forced me to do so.
No,
but I
don't.
always knew, no matter what was going on, good times, bad times, walking with Him, not walking with Him, that His hand was always right there.
Amen.
And in those quiet moments, when you've done something and you know that you've done something and you're embarrassed about it and you're just by yourself and you're just, "Lord, help me.
Yeah.
I can't do this and I can't do that." But He's always there with his hand, and you could reach out and it was as if I could just feel the fingertips.
Yeah.
And then at some point in time it was, "I'm with you, Lord."
Yeah.
And you went through that, didn't you?
I did go through that, and so I count the 12 years as something I look back now. I needed it. I needed every bit of it.
It saved you.
It saved my life. They talk about prison ministry or prison jailhouse religion, and I say it's true. It's true. There's a lot of people in the churches out here that'll walk away. There's guys that'll be in prison that'll walk away. But when you're in that environment, you're in the wilderness, God has an opportunity, if you'll listen, if you'll seek Him, to mold you and shape you. And I got out. I've been out now about 2 years. Had a little setback. My daughter was found dead at 29 years old.
Yeah.
From drinking, and not from drinking. She was detoxing from it. Beautiful girl, college graduate from KU, and she struggled with drinking, and she was found from the detoxing of the alcohol, gave her a seizure, and they found her dead. And I'll never forget that phone call at work, telling me that. And
No parent wants that one.
no, they don't. And I've talked to many parents, and they say, "Man, if that happened, that's it. I couldn't." And I'm here to tell anybody who's lost a child, who's lost a loved one, Christ is the answer. And I was sitting on a porch in Salina, Kansas at the Journey home. It's a Christian home. My I'd got myself in there, right? And it was a good environment to be around Christian men at that time. A lot of stuff was going on, rumors about her death, and it was I was starting to be trapped by unforgiveness of myself because I'd never really presented the gospel to my daughter the way I
planned. You were
planned.
blaming yourself?
A lot of things, yes. Yeah. And the enemy was just getting ready to take me out. And I was desperate, and the Lord delivered me. He showed up. He showed up to the point where I seen him in the spirit, and he told me, he said, Brandon, I'm bigger than even the death of your daughter, and I will not let this come between us. And right then I was set free, in a moment and in an instant. And I've never had any more bondage from her death. I miss her, I cry for her, but we have them rights as humans, but there's no bondage. And I'm here, anyone that's lost a loved one. And I've talked to other people, and I've seen other people get set free from this truth, because it's not from me, it's from the Lord. And they say, well, man, God hasn't talked to me like that. And I say, but he is right now. So anyone who hears this, the Lord's speaking the same thing to you if you're in bondage. And it's the same thing when we find his truth and his word. He'll set us free.
Oh, yeah.
He'll set us free. A lot of these things.
And he'll say, take my hand.
Yes, he will.
Take my hand. I'll take you out of the pit.
Yes. There's a lot of deliverance ministries out there in the churches I see, and there's a need. But most of the time in my life and what I've seen with other people is they just haven't received the truth. Because Jesus said in John 8, the Son sets you free, you shall be free indeed. So once a man's ministered to and he receives the truth, generally, he's going to get set free. And sometimes people are possessed and they do need a deliverance. But for anyone who's in bondage from the loss of a loved one, and just turn to the Lord and receive what he told me. He's bigger than that. And it almost sounds maybe not as comforting and as we're used to in the world, but the truth sets us free. And no matter in any situation. And the Lord set me free. And that's my message to people that are hurting and in bondage. And it doesn't got to be to the loss of a loved one. You could be struggling out there right now in drug addiction and don't know where to turn or anything, or just lonely.
Yeah.
You know, the Lord's bigger than that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want this to come between you and him.
You're exactly right. And the bottom line is, don't give up.
Never.
Don't give up. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to the last segment of our show today. And Brandon, I've really enjoyed visiting with you.
Yeah,
I can see the pain, and they can't see your hands, but I can tell when you're nervous about other things, when you're talking about it, and when you're just on fire for the Lord. That's the whole key. The bottom line for this is, and you've told me this before we even got on the air, and I've heard you talk and how you reach out to others at the church, and the bottom line is, don't give up. Because the Lord doesn't give up on you.
He never does.
Nope. And I always go back to this one about Jesus being crucified and the thief on his right over there. And that said, you know.
He believed.
He believed.
He believed in who Christ was.
And Jesus told him, you'll be in paradise with me today.
Amen.
Hey, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. And Brandon, thank you, buddy.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.